Well, hello, folks. Nice to see you. Um, Yesterday, I went on a nice bike ride. I had a different setting on my little camera here. So it's a little bit different type of format. But while I was riding, I was kind of on a tirade because a friend of mine who often annoys me, but he's a good guy, trolled me again on Facebook. We're baby boomers. We still use Facebook. What can I say? So, algorithms are funny and people are funny. So, like, if you post some piece, like a documentary or something, or just a news item from Al Jazeera or certain news outlets, people will maybe they just get it in their feed because the algorithm noticed that you hate it, you hate that outlet, and so they want you to get involved and click and comment and do all the things you're supposed to do to to be a good net citizen. So it pops up on their thing. In this case, it was a piece about the protests regarding Gaza and the war over there. Call it what you will. And I got the canned response, which was basically the solution is release the hostages. Everything will be fine. And this is years. I'm sorry I'm smiling, but it's just so bizarre to me that if I don't see the absurdity of it, I just get so upset. And one of the reasons why I want to make this video today is because I want to tone down my response to it and try to be a bit more coherent in my narrative or whatever I'm trying to say here. Because it's something that's really mulling around in my mind, and I want to get it out. And sorry, this is not. Well, maybe this is like geezer therapy or something, but I just gonna give it a shot and see if it comes out right. If not, I might not even share this video. I don't know why I'm freaking talking like this right now. I should just get on with it. But anyway, yeah, so there's a protest in Amsterdam. A whole bunch of people are marching, and somehow you make light of it because all they have to do is release the hostages. It's a very shallow, simplistic understanding of the situation over there. And I pointed out in a video I just put up, I ran a clip of a documentary or a little piece that somebody did that was quite well done from TRT World. This is Turkish outlet, right? So you have German and Turkish and Chinese and Nigerian and Indian and so on. A lot of people in the States won't listen to anything but what they're habituated to listening to. So whatever that is, you know the outlets. And so this is the noise or the info stream hitting their head, and they just parrot back what they hear there. So if a pundit doesn't like, let's just say for the sake of it, TRT World, because it's Turkish, we don't like those Ottomans, we don't like those Muslims, or whatever the reason, it's like, they can't be true. Their leader's a dictator. Erdogan, he's bad. you know, and you're sitting in the United States, where you have Trump as the president and Hegseth and all these crazy characters, and somehow you're like, well, Erdogan, Putin, You're just pointing your finger everywhere. Macron's in a pickle. France is is a mess. Germany's a mess. The whole world's a mess. Now, maybe if you have enough money and so on, the world's perfect for you. I mean, all you're concerned about is what golf course you're going to this weekend, which is great. I have nothing against people who are comfortable and happy. Or maybe you're better than me and you are more spiritual or smarter or better educated or richer. There's nothing Americans like more than a pissing contest. And so we're always trying to compare ourselves with other people. My thing is better than your thing, kind of stuff. This is the difference between me and you, kind of thing. And people tend to do that. Sometimes I don't know if people are being serious on social media, right? Like strangers react very sincerely to some things that I share. They don't know me, and so they're just looking at the content, and they may be simpatico with it or not, and so their response to it is sincere. You know, whereas some of my old baby boomer friends, what's Bulliam T on about these days? What's his thing? And they're going to take the piss out of me because I've always been kind of contentious and kind of into current events and up for a fun argument and all that kind of thing. But I think some people are truly shallow. I mean, they just have a low resolution information ecosystem or stream that they're addicted to or whatever, low fidelity. And they're stuck in it. And if you try to unstick them, if you try to suggest that they look at this, that, or the other thing, they won't do it out of stubborn spite because obviously they're smarter than you, better than you. Why would they listen to you? And, friends sometimes can be a little bit competitive. I don't really know what people are thinking, to be honest. I'm just speculating. So who knows? But I think a lot of times people are stubborn. If they don't want to know something, they don't want to know something. If they're not interested in something, they're not interested in something. And getting all excited and enthusiastic about it or outraged or whatever emotional state you want to share with somebody regarding a thing, it's not going to impress them. It's not going to capture their attention. It's not going to be salient to them. And so they're not going to listen. They're not going to notice. And they might even decide that just because you suggested that this may be the case or this might be a good source of information or whatever, they might just decide that because you suggested it, they're definitely not going to look at it. And also, it's a matter of fitting in, and I talk about audience capture all the time, and there's different types of audience capture and so on. Anyway, I ranted and raved, and most of it was just over the top, a little too emotional. And so I didn't share that. I just cut that part of the video out, and I wanted to try to do something at my desk that was a little bit more toned down. So that's what I'm going to do. Like I said, people talk about consciousness raising and so on. You want to make people aware of certain things. You want to provide them pathways, techniques, practices that can help them improve their situation, whether it's their intellect or their spiritual, emotional state or financial or whatever. There's all the great how-to stuff. People can learn how to do something. And there are all kinds of good things one can spend one's time on that are good for people. And whatever a person's interested in, I think that's great. I think a lot of us over the course of a lifetime, and I'm talking from a baby boomer perspective, in my life, I've been alive decades longer than a 20-year-old or whatever, a 30 or 40-year-old, but and lived through different times. And over the course of those years, I've paid attention to different things. And in some cases, learned a thing or two along the way. My worldview is constantly evolving because I'm always paying attention to what's going on. Whether or not I'm paying attention to the right thing or not, I can't say. I mean, many times I'm not. And I've recognized this by remembering what I looked at 20 years ago and then analyzing it from my perspective today. One thing we don't have in the States, especially in the West, but in the States especially, is a memory. So people quickly forget what was going on in 2016 or 2014 or 2010 or 2008, or just name a period where there was great upheaval and consternation and people were screaming and yelling about something, and it's gone. Somebody gets shot and 3 weeks later you forget about it. As soon as certain kinds of people can't use an event for political or social or financial, what's a word, capital or gain or whatever, they just drop it and move on to the next thing. Everything's like a tool, That's why I call Trump a tool. Certain people have a certain ideological bent and they're stuck on it and they really believe in it. And nothing's going to put them off of that way of thinking. So you're not going to sit down with Marco Rubio and he's going to have a come to Bullion tea moment. And, it's not going to happen. I don't know what Marco Rubio would tell me if we had, 5 hours chatting at the cafe in Lisbon or something with no one listening. What do you really believe, Marco? Some people are very, I'm sure, venal and full of it, and they're just using certain ideological wrappers to get ahead or to maintain their position in the hierarchy. Everybody's into status and all that kind of thing. I don't know how these people actually think, but I do know that you can recognize certain patterns. And that's what I was saying about, you see how people behave over time and you recognize certain patterns and you get a pretty good idea about where they're coming from. And I also recognize that after having conversations with a particular person for 20 years or 30 years, my conversation or what I think about and talk about, the way I see things has shifted over time. But the way my friend sees things hasn't at all. So I would characterize that as a kind of inability to learn or to grow or to recognize or to become aware of different ways of seeing or understanding the world. Now, this same person might have learned a lot of stuff, how to rebuild a carburetor, how to plant tomatoes, how to sell insurance, or how to do something or another. And this is great. And so that's learning something, right? And one can read a lot of books along the way. and friends of mine have admitted to me that they seek out certain books to read because they have biases and interests, and they would never read this, that, or the other thing. And I'm the same way, except I'll probably read this, that, and the other thing. So if somebody talks about postmodernism or anything, just name it, I'll probably read in it a little bit because I want to know what it is. I don't think I can have even a shallow kind of inexpert opinion of a thing unless I've looked into it a bit. So I'll do that. That's why I went down the right wing rabbit hole that I went down. And I'm glad I did because I understand these people. You know, you read Evola, you read Pareto. And it's the same thing with the economists, right? What's the big deal about this, that, or the other economist, right? And where did they get their ideas from? So it doesn't just happen overnight. And I read a lot of books where people put things into deep historical perspective. So they might start in ancient times and work all the way up to now, and then project into the future in their narrative. And I find that fascinating. I love those kind of books. And so you want to know the thinking of a particular person. It didn't come out of thin air, out of the ether. There was a progression of their thought, and they finally landed on something that stuck with them, and they delved into it and developed content, intellectual content about it, and became an advocate of it. And you can see how they change over time, right? If you read their earlier work and their later work and recognize how they change. And there's so many examples of it that to come up with a whole bunch of examples is just, trying to prove to you that I've read a book. And generally, you know, it's no secret what I like to read if you're familiar with me anyway. But you can do that in any domain, right? History or whatever. There are so many Western-centric narratives out there, histories, and they're all biased, and they're all coming from a certain worldview, a certain place, a context. And once you understand that, you tend to have a better awareness of what's really going on in the world and in any particular situation. So you might be more nuanced, and to be more nuanced isn't to just be a geezer splaining jerk. It means that you have multiple points of view that you can draw from and more data points, which leads to higher resolution or higher fidelity, however you want to put it, understanding of a thing. And sometimes, like I know I have a problem because I might jump in a little too soon. And it's important to let your friend or interlocutor express themselves, tell you what they know, and for you to listen to it carefully. And even if their understanding of a particular thing is rather shallow, simplistic, or even if it's dangerous or pathological, it's better to listen and understand where they're at, and then see how receptive they are to learn more about a thing. Because they're not in a university lecture room listening to a professor. They're talking to a friend or a stranger or somebody. And so nobody likes to be lectured to. And I tend to do that. I'll just spin off into a kind of lecture, not to say that I'm an expert in anything, but I just tend to do that because there's so much going on in my head. And there are so many reference points I'm thinking about when I'm listening. Sometimes I have to slow down, shut myself down, and just focus on listening. And then later, see how receptive my conversation partner is to looking at something else, right? You know when somebody's never read Marx. People will say things, it's a tip off to me anyway. I'm not saying people should read Marx. I'm not telling you what to read. But I know that if you had read Marx, you would have a better understanding of things now. In particular, what happened in the 19th century, and I'm asking friends who know me, don't troll me with mainstream media nonsense. And I'm not saying that commercial, corporatist, mainstream media outlets are all producing crap. I'm sure that all these outlets produce some good stuff. But most of it is canned, scripted, and distributed far and wide. And it becomes the basis of a particular kind of pernicious and destructive narrative that it isn't helping us. And to find original content or content where the the producer of the content, the journalist, the writer, documentarian, whatever, has really done their research, has really looked into things carefully, and is doing the work and provides their references and their sources when they can, and so on and so forth. You're going to learn something about the world. And if you're just reading the canned propaganda, the narrative, you're not learning anything. You're being manipulated, influenced, persuaded, nudged. And it's easy to do that with people. We're all so easily taken in and fooled and conditioned. And anyone who thinks they're not conditioned is simply wrong. We overestimate our agency, our free will, our ability to make a choice with conviction, with awareness, with presence of mind. We all overestimate that, in my opinion. It takes quite a lot, actually. I'm not talking about the fast knee-jerk reactions. You can look at Sapolsky and all the arguments about free will or no free will and all that kind of stuff. From experts and from intellectual influencers like Sam Harris or whoever you want to choose. If you want to go there, you know, there have been lots of really interesting studies and experiments and so on. I'm just talking about thinking slow, really trying to understand, recursive thought, critical thinking, where you really want to understand what's going on. And so you need to examine different perspectives and have multiple data points and so on. You just have to do it to be able to really have a clear picture of what's happening in the world. And if you're not doing that, you really don't know anything. And for people to be able to evolve to a point in their consciousness and awareness to make critical choices about who they want in leadership, how they want to live, what's important, and so on. I saw an article today where somebody was talking about health starts with the health of living systems here. You know, you don't have to say the planet, you don't have to say Earth, blah, blah, blah. The thing that's unique about where we live, where we evolved, is that we're alive. Define it any way you want. I've read lots of books about, you know, what is life and how did it arise and all that kind of stuff. It's so fascinating, and we don't know exactly, right? We have ideas, theories, hypotheses, philosophical musings on it, poetic musings on it, but we don't know. But anyway, living systems, biology, physics, the laws of nature, all of these things came together to create this beautiful living system that we're part and parcel of. And if you want to be healthy, we need a healthy world, healthy living systems. And of course, you can look at that however broadly or narrowly you wish to look at it. You know, your cardiovascular system, your education, you know, your muscles, your ability to do anaerobic and aerobic work, and so on and so forth. There's so many ways you can look at it, all the way to the, you know, soil biology, the forest rather than the trees, different kinds of ecosystems. And then when you add the complexity of society to that, and human consciousness and agency, and our amazing ability at tool making and so on, and that's another layer of complexity. And then you add to that civilization at scale, large scale civilization, which started, whatever, 10, 9, 8,000 years ago. Different people have different ideas about that, but the timeline is a long timeline, thousands of years, not days, not hundreds of years. And collapse is a long timeline, hundreds of years. And it just depends on when you zoom into that graph, you know, that illustration of what are we looking at here? Is it really fine-grained detail? Are we looking at up to the nanosecond of data points, or are we looking at a trend, a broader trend over a decade or 100 years? We can't predict what's going to happen with global heating and climate change, but we do know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's changing everything. So the kind of world that our species has lived in over the last 10,000 years, for example, as opposed to 75,000 years or 200,000 years, you know, I guess I'm saying there's many ways to look at a thing, right? It's changing fast. And our civilization, our behavior, our way of life, our life ways, our living ways, profoundly affect everything. And they are going to impact all of us, and in particular our children. And the point I made rather too emotionally when I was riding my bicycle was, I have these baby boomer friends who made children in their 50s. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not anti-natal, pro-natal. I think our population is too big for obvious reasons, because we live on a planet with finite resources, and you know, you can look at, like I said, all the usual things that collapsologists and overshootologists look at, energy and physics and so on, biology. Yeah, civilization at scale, it's problematic, and we are going through some changes, and these changes are accelerating. Everything we're doing now is accelerating everything. So the United States wants to go to war with Venezuela Iran, Russia, China, which is absurdly crazy. I think anyone who has any kind of awareness understands that. Anyone who reads books understands that. If you read like me, you can't not understand that. But I think intuitively, most people know that's ridiculous, right? It's not a two-front war, but like a multi-front war kind of thing. I mean, my friends claim to be interested in the history of World War II or whatever, and they didn't learn anything from studying history of World War II if they think that war today is useful in any way. Nobody wins, and we're running out of low-hanging fruit in terms of energy and materials. So how does this end? It doesn't end well. That's why I brought up population bottleneck. We know that there have been times in the past where our species hit a bottleneck. Maybe there were only 5,000 people on the planet at one time, Homo sapiens. And we know that all hominids except us are already extinct. We know that extinction is the rule, not the exception. We know that biodiversity is waning. We're wiping out plants and animals at a horrific rate. These are all indisputable. It's not good for anything, right? I don't believe we're going to be a machine. I don't think you're going to be living forever in a mechanical whatever body or anything like that. I think the AGI and super AGI and whatever is overrated, overblown. It's BS. It's another bubble. It's another Ponzi scheme. Of course, it's amazing technology, and but there are limits to it because of energy, physics, biology, all those things. And it is a scam, unfortunately. You don't win when your leaders push you into war. You don't win. The careerists in power win because they're incentivized. They get paid. They achieve status. They hang out in all the nice rooms, in the nice suits. They smell good. They behave well. But and they have a wonderful little clique that they can live with. But we get had, and it's happened over and over again throughout history. So, why is somebody writing war as a racket in the beginning of the 20th century? And here we are. The other point I want to make is if the West is so great, and if the United States of America is so wonderful, and so worth fighting for, and so it's so important for us to dominate the whole planet. In other words, every nation on Earth, all nations should surrender their. If we're so great, why are we in this pickle? Now, if you don't believe we're in a pickle, that there's a polycrisis, that things aren't, we're not living in the best of all possible worlds, as Voltaire might muse in Candide, then maybe we're the problem, right? I mean, everything. Okay, you're alive, which means all your relatives in the past procreated. They all had babies, and you're here. So the intellectual, ideological babies, right, of Western civilization have led to this: a polycrisis, overshoot, gradual collapse. You may not be interested in limits to growth and things like that, but you can't avoid it. You may not be interested in politics, but you can't avoid that either. So if it's so great, why Trump? And what we tend to do is point our finger. We blame, right? It's Their fault. That's why it happened. If only Kamala Harris, if only something or another. But Obama led to Trump, Trump to Biden. Biden was a wreck. Biden to Trump. Why Trump again? Because of Biden. But that's simplistic, obvious. Obviously, there are more reasons than that. But you see what I'm saying. This leads to that, right? In terms of Ukraine, why Ukraine? Well, it's just obvious that if Russia or China was building up its military might in Canada on the border of the United States, the U.S. would have a problem with it, and there'd be a special military operation. People forget that we invaded Vietnam. I don't know how else you can characterize it. Now, we always have reasons for doing things. McNamara and Kissinger, everybody, the smartest people in the room can come up with lots of rationalizations and reasons for doing stupid things and getting lots of people killed. But what was the result of it? I mean, Vietnam's a socialist country. Ooh, my God, satanic. But look at the population of Vietnam now compared to the 1960s. I've been to Vietnam. It's not a third world country anymore. I don't like that terminology, but you know what I mean. And the first time I went to China was in 1980. And I've been to China in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. I'm not going back because that part of my life is over. And the same thing, first time I went to Japan, I was 7. I used to go to Mexico by myself when I was a kid. But the point is, what did we achieve in Iraq? Well, the Iraq shock and awe led to civil war, ISIS, blah, blah, blah. Now we regime changed Assad, and what do we have now? What did we get when the Shah of Iran left? What did we get when we put the Shah of Iran in? Look at Chile now. Okay, Pinochet's gone. He's dead. Everybody dies. Hitler's dead. Putin's going to die someday. Xi Jinping's going to die someday. What's next? We don't have that much agency. We don't know what's going on. We haven't decided what's important yet. The health of living systems. And an educated, involved citizenry that cares about living systems. Anyway, my point is all of it led up to Trump. So you can blame Trump if you want, but look, that's what your way of life, what you do every day, whatever it is, with your addictions, if you have them or not, with your entertainments, with your working so hard, with your just trying to survive. You know, different people have different levels of agency. You may be so poor and so stressed that the only thing you can do is work 4 jobs to take care of the kids. And you may have so many resources that you have a staff helping you with your travels around the world and your business trips and your meetings and all that stuff. Look at these stupid shows on TV like Suits, Suits LA. I mean, what a grotesque culture, in my opinion. But anyway, people think it's cool, these tough guys, lawyers. Law is important at a civilizational scale, for sure. But it's not the most important thing in the world. The most important thing in the world is the integrity and health of living systems. Anyway, this will end like everything ends, with a population bottleneck. At some point, the PFAS and the microplastics in the brain and the testosterone dump and the endocrine problems and the dead soil, and you cut down the Amazon, and you acidify the oceans, and you heat up the atmosphere with CO2 and whatever. It just doesn't end well, and you have billions of people dying. And then you reboot, right? People, you're not going to be, it's not going to be this R species, K species thing going on. Nobody thinks like that. It'll just be, how do we survive now? That the only place you can grow food or get food is in a in some tiny little place in northern Canada or whatever. I don't know. And the only animals you can hunt are little squirrels or something. I don't know. Because, the domesticated animals are all gone because we can't support them at scale and blah, blah, blah. You can't feed them. Once you don't have the petrochemical based fertilizers and energy systems to produce all the food and packaging and logistics, transportation and all that of all the food, people start to starve to death. You know, is there enough rice? Is there enough grain? And then you're thinking, like I saw this report, this Ukrainian woman was saying, in her village things were okay because they had some chickens and they had a pig, and the soldiers that came through didn't take their chickens or eggs or pigs. In fact, they gave them some water and stuff, so they're okay. They can eat. But famine is a bitch. Sorry for the language. You study the potato famine, the Irish potato famine, the blight. It's not just a natural occurrence. That was a human engineered problem all the way through. And you can look at where do potatoes come from and where do tomatoes and chili peppers come from. There's so many different ways to look at that. But one of the most vital ways to look at the potato famine was how was business run in Ireland by the Brits at that time. So you take the food and you export it because you can get a better price, and people couldn't feed themselves. Anyway, there's a lot of good books on the history of the Irish potato famine, but you can look at any famine in the history of the world. And you'll understand the complex causes of it. It's never just one thing. And a lot of it always boils down to how the business class is running things. And you can characterize the business class in different ways. You can talk about East India, British East India, Dutch East India, Belgian, Congo, all the colonial systems. You can talk about the Middle Ages, serfs and whatever. You look at all kinds of things, the Pax Romana, the Roman system, the Ottoman system, the Arab conquest. It doesn't matter where you look at the samurai fighting and how they incentivized blah, blah, blah. The history of Africa, the history of China, the history of India. There's been many ways of organizing things since civilization really started chugging along. And it's been a bloody mess all along. The thing is, you might say, well, that's just human nature and that's just reality, and you're a realist and all that kind of thing, which is fine. Maybe human suffering, animal suffering, pain, it's not a thing. Why get all hung up on morals and ethics? It's a construct. One man's moral behavior is another man's orgy or whatever. I don't know. I know porn when I see it. It doesn't just boil down to that. These are deep questions that have been thought about forever. You want to talk about the ancient Greeks or whatever philosophies. And people discount Arab philosophy. There's so many brilliant thinkers and philosophers, mathematicians, but we're bigots. We're racist even if we don't know it. We just don't like Arabs. We love hummus. We love tahini. We love, the food, but we hate Arabs. Whatever. So many of my expat Anglo-Saxon friends, they love the Asian women, the African women, whatever, but they don't like Africa. They don't like Africans. They don't like Chinese. It's weird. It's weird. And, it goes back to being a child and watching Green Beret and playing cowboys and Indians and just being brought up in this cultural milieu where you're from the heroic, civilized nation and you're fighting all the brutes, all the savages all the time. We don't know why they're savages, really. I mean, we don't know them. We've never met them, but they are, and they have to be destroyed. We have to protect ourselves from them. All the boogeymen. Even Stalin and Mao are more complex individuals, and the whole story of Maoist China and Stalinist Soviet Union is more complex than these cardboard cutout boogeymen characters. And you can always cherry pick how many people died and why. And like I said, the potato famine, the complex reasons for the famines in Ukraine, in that region during the Soviet Union, the kulaks and all that kind of thing. The thing is, it's ubiquitous, right? These famines, whether it's in Japan or China at a particular time or whatever. What makes it different now is that we have the potential to have agency, to understand what's going on, and to make good choices, good decisions, and to come up with ways to mitigate the most horrific and painful elements of our ongoing predicament. But we don't seem to want to do that. We're stuck in these other patterns of thought, which is tragic, because the only thing I can think of is like, is it possible at all for us around the world to come together and make things a little less painful for everybody? And I mean everybody, because I don't know. I'm not going to talk about Buddha or Jesus or whatever, transcendental this or secret that or Course in Miracles or whatever. It just seems to make sense to me as a human being and as a conscious living animal with agency that I don't want people or animals or things to suffer too much, right? We don't like it in general. The vast majority of people in the world are decent people who want to feel good about themselves. They want to feel good about each other. They want to do good, and so on. And you can't blame people for not being too aware or too conscious or too well educated, or, I'm not educated enough, or I'm ignorant, or whatever. It's not their fault necessarily, which is why I get so angry at people who should know better. That really frustrates me. It's not the guy down the street who's only read 5 books. There may be many, many good reasons why that person's only read 5 books. And I'm not virtue signaling when I say that I have read a lot, that I read a lot, that it's just part of my life. So what? It doesn't make me holy. It doesn't make me wise. It doesn't make me smart. I'm just an average human being. But when people just so cavalierly and carelessly talk about these horrible events in such simplistic ways, while people are suffering and dying, It just makes me sick and angry. And I want to ask you, if you're one of my friends, my geezerly friends, to stop. Don't direct that towards me. This is a message to you know who you are. Keep that for the other people that want to make jokes like that, and you know who they are. Keep those dirty, stinky, ugly jokes to yourself. I don't need it. You know me. You know how I think. You know what I read. So talk to me about something that's interesting, something that you can teach me that's positive, and we'll have a nice, productive conversation and relationship. I just can't abide that anymore. So unfortunately, sometimes when you have a friend that doesn't seem to have grown much over the course of 30 years, you just have to let them go because you're not going to have any kind of fruitful interaction with them anymore. It's going to be the same old thing over and over and over again. And for a lot of my friends who think they're political, they're not political. They're just caught up in the zeitgeist, in the, of the whole thing. And, they're just caught up. Or they wouldn't have so much faith in these candidates who just are in no position to change anything because of the way the system's structured, because of the way it works, because of the way the capital is coded, and on and on and on. And AI and all these methods of super hyper persuasion are not going to help us. We're going to become more and more programmed to go along with the more pathological aspects and elements of our global culture. And for people who have no empathy or respect for others around the world, I just can't abide you. It's just hard for me. I can't think that this nation is full of ignorant and ugly and stupid people. You know, I don't know about, I've been to Mali, but I don't know Mali culture or Chad, Central African Republic. I've been to Congo and Uganda and Tanzania and Kenya and blah, blah, blah. And it's all great. But I'm not totally familiar with those cultures and so on. I've driven across Thailand and across China and across Japan and across the United States. There are places I'm more familiar with, but things keep growing and changing. You go to Bali in the 70s and you go back now. I can't go back now. It just hurts my feelings because, you see all the big hotels and all that stuff, and it's just not the same. It's not the same. So why go back? I'm just living my simple little life here in Portugal. And I want to say the real special thing about this particular country, in my opinion, is the kindness and considerateness of the people. The people are nice. And there's a lot to be said for that. And they're a little bit less judgmental, and a little bit less arrogant than a lot of Americans. And they're better educated or more aware of a lot of things than most Americans. I hate to say it, with all your universities and everything, you're so narrow-minded, so myopic in so many ways. People here speak several languages if they're younger, not the older people. A lot of older people my age have left Portugal and come back, or maybe not. There's a diaspora, just like with Irish people and Chinese people, right? During various periods, they've left their homeland out of necessity or seeking opportunity or whatever. So there's tons and tons of people of Irish descent abroad, out of Ireland, more than the 10 million or whatever it is that live in Ireland, and that kind of thing. A lot of young people have worked abroad because they want to make more money, and they've come back. So they speak several languages, they're broad-minded, they understand other cultures and so on. And they're a lot more humble because they're not the big bad tough guy, USA, USA. Another thing that really bugs me, I watch the UFC fights, and it's odd. There'll be a foreign fighter and an American fighter, and they're chanting USA, USA, USA during the fight. Why? What does USA have to do with the fight? These are two athletes in an MMA fight. What does it have to do with anything? You know, then when there's two Americans, they chant USA, USA. I don't get it. It's so bloody weird. Then when there's two foreign fighters, what are they going to do? Chant USA, USA. It's just so odd. I mean, that identifying with the country in that way is weird, especially when most of the people chanting USA, USA hate each other. They Because that guy chanting USA is a Democrat, and that guy chanting USA is MAGA, and that guy chanting USA he looks like a Middle Easterner or whatever it is, right? It's so bizarre, but we're trained to be like that. You know, it's not their fault. It's just like they're just part of the mad crowd. But a lot of people really do think that it's the best, greatest, can do no wrong. Despite all the problems, its shit doesn't stink. You have drug problems and health problems in the U.S. Not our fault. It's their fault. It's Chinese fentanyl. Why are you taking it? What about the country motivates so many people to use their guns to commit suicide? What's that all about? I mean, you can take a city with 10 million or whatever population, a good analog or something between Portugal and whatever part of the States, and look at the numbers. It's shocking. Is that Putin's fault? I don't know, man. Is that Venezuelan's fault? Some guy in Venezuela? I don't think so. The war on drugs caused all the horror in Mexico and demand for drugs. I saw the Charlie Sheen, aka Charlie Sheen, which I thought was fantastic. 2 episodes on Netflix. This guy was pushed as an addict and worshipped, and it was just grotesque what happened surrounding this poor guy. And you can blame him for being sick if you want, but he's one of a kind, that guy. I've known people who have done crack and cocaine and whatever, and a lot of them are dead. Alcoholics as well. I can't believe the guy's still alive. He made a lot of bad choices, but he's also one of a kind. He's a brilliant, intelligent, articulate, interesting character. Like I said before, you look at all these people that we lionize, Hemingway or whatever, or the beatniks or the hippies. I don't care. Pick a clique. And so many of these people were so sick, mentally ill, and they were addicts. And they died young. They had exciting, interesting lives. They produced some good art or whatever, but in general, they led fairly miserable, painful lives. And we forget that. Charlie Sheen, the poor guy, he suffered a lot. He's sick. And nobody could help him because he didn't want the help. That happens. Just like I was saying earlier, if you don't want to learn something or about something, you're not going to do it until you're ready. And you may never be ready. A lot of my geezerly friends are, their worldview will never change. And it's like you're speaking gibberish if you talk to them about certain things. It's not on their radar. They don't get it. And you can't just tell somebody to, get clean. You're making $2 million an episode. Get clean. And of course, the people who love those people suffer. I grew up with alcoholic parents. They were fairly functional. Two of them weren't. Both my father and stepfather were not functional alcoholics. My mother was. But the kind of pain and suffering that surrounds people who are addicts is terrible. The pain and suffering their children have to go through is terrible. And we should be thinking about that. It's a public health issue. You don't blame the Chinese for it. You don't blame the Russians for it. You have to look at the causes, the complex causes of these diseases, and figure out what you need to do, lifestyle changes or cultural changes or whatever it is, to eliminate the causes of those illnesses. And of course, when you have the medical technology, like Charlie Sheen is HIV positive, and he's going to be able to live a long life with it if he stays clean, maybe. Back in the day when I was young, I knew so many people who died of HIV. If you look at that film, The Apprentice, about Cohn and Trump, it's very fascinating and well-made film. The 80s. My God, what a horror story. I lost so many friends and acquaintances. So yeah, it's good that we have these technologies and medicine, modern medicine, all that stuff. But what does it take to maintain a healthy scientific culture? And what does it take to maintain healthy technology that isn't destructive, that doesn't have too many externalities associated with it, and so on? Can we weed out the things that are wrecking the health of living systems in ourselves and our minds, our hearts? Keep the good stuff and throw the rest of it out, or shift it, change it? I have my doubts. I'm not very optimistic about it. I'm optimistic in general, but as a person, but when I think about it, I don't see it. Whatever you define as an enlightened race of folks, I just don't see it. Everything's out there. We have the tools to educate ourselves. And I'll just show you again, in case you're new to this channel. And I don't make much of an effort to promote it or anything like that. I don't think it's necessary for me to be prominent or important. I appreciate your support and attention and whatever. But, sometimes I think more content isn't the answer either. We have to delve into things on a community level and help each other raise each other's consciousness. We can't just go to workshops and take courses and so on. It has to be integrated into a way of life, a culture, to be effective. And if we can't do that at a local level, we can't do it at a global level. And we have to do it at a global level because our problems today are global problems, global civilizational, existential problems. So I'll show you. You don't have to visit my website, but this is Cospelon. This is my little thing, my personal thing. And then talking about books, there are all kinds of good books here that I recommend. And you don't have to read all of them, it's impossible. But you can just look around and see what kinds of things are out there. And maybe you can choose one or two things that interest you. It's not about knowing everything or being an expert in every domain. Nobody can do that. It's impossible. It's just about making little efforts bit by bit to broaden your perspective and understanding about how things work in the world. And also about yourself, obviously, ontology, epistemology, meditation, spirituality, all that stuff. It's all important. Any little thing you can do to improve your health and your awareness and understanding of how nature works is good. And when I say nature, that's the whole panoply of scientific inquiry and philosophical inquiry, like the natural philosophy. That's what they used to call science. And, obviously any other domain you want to choose, sociology, psychology, whatever. But you can go through and you can learn. In particular, I'm interested in overshoot because it's a thing. You're not going to be able to avoid it, and your children aren't. And one point I want to make to my Gizoli friends is their children in 10 years, if they don't broaden their mind, are going to think they're idiots. They're going to say, Dad, how can you be so stupid, so uncool, so clueless? Look at what we're facing, Dad. Look at what we have to deal with. And look at all the obstacles in the way. Look at how complex everything is. Without being really super critical thinkers, we can't even understand how we're being manipulated by AI or AGI or AGSI. You know what I mean? All of us have to be experts in using artificial intelligence because we can't use our own intelligence just to have like a part-time job. And, this isn't to address deindustrialization or whatever, ephemeralization or the TESC-real bundle or any of that. Life after fossil fuels, energy return on investment, hyperobjects, Nick Lang, The Vital Question, which is a must-read in my opinion. It's a fantastic book. Ultra Society, Overshoot, Big Gods. What is the consequences of having these big monotheistic religions? What was the utility of it? Because these stories, these myths evolved for a reason. They're human generated. I'll believe that God wrote the Bible if God comes down here and says, hey, Buliam, I wrote the damn thing. Pay attention. This came from us, and we have to examine our mind and spirit and way of thinking to understand Jesus or God or the Old Testament or the Torah or whatever it is, the Hadith, the Bhagavad Gita, Heidegger, I can't understand Kant. Sex, drugs, and Cocoa Puffs, How We Got Here, Melville, Nietzsche, Bloom, Zizek, Bannon. This is a great book, The Instability of Truth, Brainwashing, Mind Control, Hyper-Persuasion. I'm really into this hyper-persuasion perspective, especially after I read this book. And it puts it in a broader context that makes it connect with things that are important to me. That's why I love these kinds of books. The Great Leveler, Our American Israel. It's important to understand Christian Zionism because it's growing. It's growing in the global South. When people are faced with complexity and things they can't understand and problems, challenges that are really impossible to get their head around, you're going to go to magical thinking. I'm not saying religion is necessarily magical thinking, but you're going to go to these refuges, and they are populated with cult leaders, with egomaniacs who just want power and control and money. And that's the problem. Why does Reverend Sung Myung Moon need so much money and so many houses? Why does he want to be thought of as a king, as the second coming of Christ and all that stuff? Isn't that mad? What is it, Leto? Jay Leto? I forget. Anyway, all these egomaniacs, right? From the grand egomaniacs to the minor ones. Why do they need so much attention? Why do they have to, it's weird. Why do I have to call myself a guru? Well, if you're going to make a living at it, being Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, you got to come up with a name and you got a persona and you got to play that whole thing out and get some followers. We're all doing that now on the internet. I want to be an influencer. I want to be a YouTuber. I want to be big on Instagram, blah, 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 blah. Everybody wants to have their own little cult and feel like they're the center of the universe. It's freaking hard, man. It's not that easy. And it's really kind of, I just think that hanging out with a friend on a picnic blanket in the forest by the river, having conversations, reading a book is so much nicer. A bottle of wine every once in a while with a friend. The simple life is so rewarding and wonderful that it just spending, there's only 24 hours in the day and life is short. And if you're chasing attention the whole time, it's just rough. And by the way, all these gurus, they die. Scandal, death, blah, blah, blah. None of them live forever. Maybe, that Scientology is still here and all that stuff, but what's it really accomplished, right? If it's so great. Why aren't we all Scientologists, right? I mean, what happened? So propaganda, Jacques Ellul, this is a classic. You have to look at these things. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff, and like James Burnham. I love James Burnham. I don't agree with everything. I don't agree with everything anybody says in these books. But it's interesting. The token economy was fascinating. Now I'm totally against it. I was really into it. Jonathan Haidt, I don't like him anymore, but he's written some good stuff. I have reasons for having a problem with him. Karl Popper, great stuff. But, you don't have to believe everything in it. Bitcoin clarity and all this stuff. Leonardo da Vinci, how to think like Leonardo da Vinci, things like that. Recapture the Rapture, that's our friend Jamie Wheel. It's interesting. You get your PowerPoint, you have your talking points, you create a persona, you're intellectually on fire, you're interesting, articulate. What I don't like are these narrow-minded idiots who are reading off a script that their donors give them, like Ben Shapiro or whatever, or these crybabies. I could name names, but it doesn't help. Sand Talk, Tyson is a wonderful guy, Australian Aboriginal background and whatnot. Bad War, looking at Afghanistan, stuff like that, blowback. These wars have a history. When you look back 10 years and you've done the research, or 20 or 30, and you have a high resolution understanding of those events, and then you can really know what went on. We're just looking at the news. Oh my God, Putin did this, Putin did that, whatever. And it's just knee-jerk reactions to punditry. And that's all just a kind of way to make a living. These people have no intellectual integrity. None of them do. Sun Tzu, right? You can read old stuff. Anyway, it's a lot of things. And then every once in a while, you might want to read around a subject, which is, I wish I had more time to read, but you don't. This is too much anyway. And a lot of these books I read just since the pandemic because I had too much time on my hands. Lucky me. Where do I get into some, You know, you want to know about China, you have to read around China. You don't just read one book. So these are just some of the books I've read about China and from various points of view, you know. Um, and Russia as well. And it's not much, it's not a comprehensive list, but it's from various points of view, you know, so you have an idea. Not just one book on Stalin, but a couple. Eco-socialist books, what the hell is that? Do I think eco-socialism is going to work? I don't see how it's going to happen. But, you know, we have to look at these ideas because we need something else in the world. And I mentioned to a friend the other day, if you haven't read Capital, you're missing something, really, really missing something. Or you could at least read some Marxist scholars and books about it, you know. So that eco-socialism thing and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, a lot of things going on there. And I have a lot of web links that I share and blah, blah. This isn't to say that the stuff that I have on my website is the be all and end all of understanding how the world works or anything like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just suggesting to people that they broaden their scope, get more points of view and more data points, or what, however you want to characterize it, what lingo, cool lingo you want to use to sound smart. Anyway, if we all did that, we'd be better off and we'd be less of a bore, and we would be able to make better decisions. And I keep saying that video after video after video, but it just seems like you have to say it in a million different ways a million times before one or two people might understand what you're talking about and how important it is. So it's important to me, and that's why I harp on it. I don't want to be a boring guy, but you know, I think it's important, so that's what I talk about. I'll end it there because it's been pretty long, hasn't it? So I hope you got something out of it, this video, and click like and subscribe and share it if you want, and appreciate any help or feedback. I could do things that were a little bit better organized, but that requires scripting and a tiny staff, a lot more work, and I just don't have time to invest in that right now. If I did, I would, but I don't. But if you want to see discussions like that, or if you want to talk to me about anything, you're more than welcome to contact me and we can talk. And also, I don't need to talk to people on camera or to monetize a conversation or build my viewership on the back of people. For me, it's just good to talk to somebody. And some journalists and content producers and so on that I know, I've talked to, but not on camera or anything, just on WhatsApp or whatever, Zoom, just a conversation, 5-10 minutes. And sometimes those conversations go for an hour and it's like, oh, okay, we got some things to talk about. That was fun. That was interesting. And everybody's busy, especially journalists and so on. And so you don't want to take too much of their time. You have to be respectful. But I'm open, so contact me if you wish. If you want to comment on anything that I do on Substack or here, you're welcome. And I promise I'll give you an honest response. I'll take some time. And I can afford to do that now because I don't have 1 billion followers. You know, I don't have to have a staff to reply to my fan mail. So the time is now. I'd love to have any kind of fruitful and enjoyable conversation with anybody at any time, and I often do that. And I do that with strangers on the streets of Porto Lisboa and Coimbra, Caldas da Rainha, Nazaré, because I'm a friendly guy. Anyway, take good care. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I hope we can come together somehow in any small way to mitigate the worst aspects of the effects of our pathological global civilization. I'm not a negative person, but, we've got some problems, some issues. Bully MT, out.